An alternative version of an already existing character is one way the developers use to shake things a bit and prevent their series from going stale. It's true that coming up with brand new fighters with each installment is sometimes necessary. It's also risky and not always a resounding success. Sometimes, all it takes to refresh the roster is to reinvent the moveset of an already popular character. It's a proven formula that was used countless times, and it is thanks to it that we ended up with the definitive variations of many beloved fighters. These alternate versions can be the result of a twist in story, or a callback to an old version from their original game, and then there are those who are created from the get-go with multiple variations in mind. Without further ado, here's the top 10 alternative characters in KOF. The EX version of Blue Mary in KOF 98 uses her moveset from real Bout Fatal Fury 2. In short, she still has somewhat the same moves, but they are weirder to do now. Her spider can only be done after a super, and her slicer is followed with her stun gun attack instead of her clutch. She has a new diving attack that can be finished either with a kick or a grab, but I don't find it very useful. Her counter or sidestep can be cancelled into her German suplex, which became her default move later, and this can also be followed with another throw, which she used to have in Fatal Fury, but it's not as effective as her German suplex. Mary has an OTG under this alternative form, which is always a plus. However, she lost 2 of her supers, and that's a big deal if you ask me. Personally, I think Mary loses more than she wins in this EX variation, but at least she has a slight personality change, showing her ruthless side, which is confirmed to be a canon trait in her character. This position can be taken by any of the Fatal Fury members, but I find Andy to be the character with the most distinct moves from his 2 alternate forms. He started in KOF as a zoner, based on his iteration in Fatal Fury, and that is still his archetype in recent games, but for a very long time, Andy has a different playstyle, focusing on melee attacks and short-range techniques. Arguably, his strongest tool under this form is his Dam Breaker Punch, a move that is not quite a command grab but acts in a similar fashion. It's very easy to execute after a close C and can be followed with other attacks and supers. And he has also good air mobility with plenty of mix-ups. His fireballs are no longer long-ranged, but his heavy and light versions are very different from each other, the heavy version dealing a lot of chip damage if its victim is caught in a corner. It's worth mentioning that Andy has an evil counterpart known as Shadow Andy, but it's not canon and never made it outside real Bout Fatal Fury special, unfortunately. And with another Fatal Fury character who restored her forgotten moves under an alternative form. EX Mai in KOF 98 is slightly better than Blue Mary, mostly because she keeps most of her signature moves intact and adds some cool ones to the list. My favorite is her Kagero no Mai, though its effectiveness as an anti-air is questionable, at least not until recent games where it acts as a super, but it has an invincible reversal, and that's a big deal. Mai drops her multiple fireball super in favor of a DP-like one called Flower Storm, but keeps her famous Hisatsu Shinobi Hachi, kinda. Mai goes for a more vertical angle, making it riskier and more prone to punishment than it already was. Again, this slight variation was taken from Fatal Fury. Perhaps the most important addition is her new Shiranui Shadow, a move that is the exact same Andy has, and it is a reminder that the 2 characters are using the same fighting style. Most of EX Mai's moves list carried over to the Nest Saga games, more specifically ShoryuGame, and I consider the iteration of EX Mai in that game as the best in the franchise. Geese Howard has always been a balanced character despite making his debut as one of the most frustrating and unfair bosses to face in fighting games history. His presence in 96 wasn't really very strong, and that continued to be the case in 98 but with the introduction of his Nightmare version, Geese remembered his status as an SNK boss, because being dead makes you stronger it seems. there are two distinct variations of Nightmare Geese. The first is a 98 UM, and while it's definitely stronger than the default variation, it's still fairly tame. However, the 02 UM's Nightmare Geese is a completely different story. Simply put, Geese is so OP under this form that he becomes unplayable. Actually, even the normal version is too powerful and banned from competitions. But Nightmare Geese is just ridiculous. He does have his nightmarish version in KOF 14 as well, but at least it's just cosmetic in that game and changes nothing gameplay wise. And here's yet another zoner. Kensu has a forgotten alternative fighting style that not many remember as of late. During the Nest Saga, Kensu lost the use of his psychic abilities, including his super reliable fireballs. So instead, he developed a more hand-to-hand approach during his matches. His Arrow Dash Blast, which replaces his Fireball, is definitely Kensu's strongest tool in this alternate form, a common move among Kung Fu users with its slight variation safe on block. It can also be used to cancel his sweeps, which Kensu is known for having the best in the series. This is far from being the only tool he gained in exchange of his projectiles. The other moves are also strong and allow him new combos which he didn't have in his regular form. It's worth noting that in KOF 11, Kensu has a mixed style that combines both forms, but I still think that he is stronger when he focuses on one style at a time. Like Kensu, Takuma is another character who acquired a new alternative version during the Nest Saga, giving up his zoning playstyle. Takuma didn't actually lose his fireballs, they just became weirder. Takuma's projectile in this alternative form are invisible and short-ranged. They also cause knockdowns. His Ao Shokoken are present as well, but much like his Kohoken, they act differently. They are short-ranged and they are great to open the enemy's guard as they cause a guard crush. His best move must be his Hien Hippukyaku. It's a very fast short to mid-range special attack with its light version safe on block, undoubtedly Takuma's trump card. Let's not forget his son Ikusa no Kate, where he flexes his muscles, allowing him to armor his way through an attack without taking damage. And I know there is a third iteration of Takuma where he puts on a Tengo mask, but it's more correct to consider Mr. Karate as a separate character, even if they are the same person. This entry is a curious one. Originally, Kyuu's playstyle was based on the use of his ground-based projectiles, DP, juggles, and reverse DP. It was his default form, also known as 95 Kyo. But since 96, Kyuuun has completely reinvented his fighting style, dropping his projectiles in favor of multiple rekkas, a form that was perfected in 98 and has even more options in later games. However, the 95 Kyo didn't completely vanish either. It was relegated to a different character, namely Kusanagi, Kyo's evil clone, and even the real Kyo himself uses this form as his default fighting style in KOF 13. Overall, it's the easier form to use. Kyo plays mostly like a Shoto character and no need to memorize his infinite rekkas, making it a good option for beginners. In KOF 11, Kyo fuses both forms in one single playstyle, meaning he can cast long-ranged fireballs and performs his rekkas all at the same time. Not to mention that there is another separate form of Kyo in that game. Just how many fighting styles this guy had invented. As a main staple in KOF's roster, Robert Garcia saw the biggest number of changes in his playstyle, and that since 96, the game that hates fireballs. Like most characters, Robert's projectiles became short-ranged and became more focused on melee moves. He kept this form as his default style until 99, where Roberts was completely reinvented again, transforming into a charge character. Under this form, Robert's projectiles look a lot like sonic booms, coupled with his already existent flash kick, and you can see why this version of Robert is also known as Guide Robert. He also has a command throw-like move that acts as a launcher and allows to follow it with different moves and supers. The best thing about this alternative variation is that Robert loses nothing of his mobility. He might have dropped this form in later games and reverted to his classic playstyle. I still think Charge Robert is one of the strongest alternative forms in the series. Yep, I talked about them many times in previous videos, and there they are again. The Arashi team are always present in two different forms for each, and that since their debut in '97. The difference between their forms is so huge that you may even consider them as different characters. KOF 15 certainly seems to consider them that way. In their default forms, they're already quite strong. Geese takes advantage of his insane speed, making it hard on his opponent to follow his movements and tricking them with mind games. Shermy is the grappler of the group and one of the best in the series, while Yashiro relies on his devastating punches that hit like a truck. Switching to their awakened forms, they completely change their fighting styles. Geese abandons his speed in favor of fire-based attacks. Shermy becomes a lightning user, and Yashiro transforms into the grappler of the team. Each form has its strengths and weaknesses, and in KOF 15 you can choose both forms of the same character as two different fighters in your team, and that is awesome. Before unveiling the number 1 spot, here are some honorable mentions. I wouldn't call this alternative form rare or unknown, since it was featured in a very popular installment, but it's still strange that we didn't get to see more of it in other games. Yes, I'm talking about Claw Iori in KOF 13. Because of story reasons, Iori lost the use of his iconic purple flames, but if you think that would make him a helpless little Yagami, then you are greatly mistaken. Even without his pyrokinetic abilities, Iori is a fearsome fighter with plenty of tools to cut his opponents to shreds. Somehow, Iori looks more dangerous and animalistic, all thanks to his ancestral fighting style based on the use of his claws. He already incorporates this style in his default form, but with the loss of his flames, it becomes much more dominant with new moves and techniques. What he lost as his honor, gained as a rushdown archetype. Iori has a new command grab that is very difficult to read and can be followed with multiple combos, in addition of plenty other close range attacks. Iori had never been so dangerous in close range. His supers didn't seem to be affected by the absence of flames either. His infamous Maiden Masher works pretty much the same, with the only difference in the last hit that sees Iori performs a slashing attack instead of a fiery one. As for his level 3 super, Iori never needed fire for that one to begin with. Although this form is short-lived due to story reasons, it was very successful and fun to use. Fans loved Claw Iori in KOF 13, and I wish we can see more of it in the future. For now, it's the number 1 alternative form in the KOF series. Does your favorite character has an alternative form that you prefer? Tell us which one and why do you like it down in the comments. Special thanks to my patrons for their support. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and why not consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.